You enter a quiet room and feel it immediately. The impulse to reach for distraction, not from boredom, but from contact. The silence presses against your skin. Scroll, tap, refresh, anything to avoid what's waiting in the stillness. That thing you're running from? That's the hollow at your center, and everything you want lives on the other side of it. The panic starts within seconds, not minutes, seconds. The moment external input stops, internal chaos begins. Your mind scrambles for distraction like a drowning person scrambles for air. Podcast, music, television, anything to fill the unbearable space between you and you. We've become experts at this escape, perfected the art of never being alone with ourselves. Every moment scheduled, every gap filled, every silence smothered before it can speak. We call it being productive, connected, engaged, but we know what it really is. Terror management. Running from a nothingness that feels like it might swallow us whole. Your body knows this pattern intimately. The shallow breathing when quiet threatens. The restless leg that starts moving without permission. The sudden, urgent need to check something. Anything. Everything. These aren't random fidgets. They're escape routes your flesh has memorized. But every escape deepens the distance. Each avoidance teaches your nervous system that silence is danger. Until one day, stillness feels like suffocation, when it was always oxygen. We've built entire civilizations around avoiding this encounter. Every tool, every feed, every vibration in your pocket is an altar to this avoidance. We built a world that monetizes our flight from ourselves. Your daily routine. How much is necessary and how much is elaborate avoidance? The phone checked before your eyes fully open. The podcast during your shower. Noise in every transition. The scroll before sleep. When was the last time you experienced actual silence? The kind where you can hear your own heartbeat. Feel your own breathing. Notice the thoughts you spend all day drowning out. You've built a life with no gaps. Input during every task. Even meditation becomes another thing to optimize, another achievement to unlock, another way to be productive rather than present. Your body keeps different records. The tension that never leaves your shoulders. The jaw that stays tight even in sleep. The exhaustion that no amount of rest touches. The way you startle at sudden sounds even when you're safe. These are the ledgers of a soul taxed beyond capacity. Proof that motion can become its own form of self-erasure, until your body overrules your schedule. Not dramatically, quietly. First, insomnia that meditation apps can't fix. Then migraines that medication can't touch. Pain that has no physical source but won't leave. Breakdown is how the body prays when the mind refuses to listen, forced into the silence you've been running from. No distractions, no performances, no productivity to prove your worth. Just you, alone with the hollow you've built an empire to avoid. The first days feel like withdrawal, not from caffeine or substances, but from stimulation itself. The absence of distraction feels like death. Your hands reach for phones that aren't there. Your mind races through to-do lists that no longer matter. Every cell screams for input, for noise, for anything but this unbearable encounter with your own unmediated existence. You pace. You clean things that don't need cleaning. You start projects just to abandon them. You have conversations in your head with people who aren't there. Anything to avoid the terrifying sensation of simply being, with nothing between you and yourself. The silence isn't peaceful. It's loud with everything you've been drowning out. regrets you've outrun, griefs you've postponed, questions you've refused to let land. They've been waiting in the quiet, and now that you've stopped moving, they're walking toward you. Then something shifts. Beneath the panic, another current moves. One slower, older, deeper. It doesn't demand or scream. It waits. The silence stops being empty and starts being alive. You begin to hear small sounds that were always there. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint pulse in your own ears, the whisper of your own breath. At first, these sounds seem external. Then you realize they were always part of you. What you've been calling silence is just unamplified life. The mind still fights, throwing thoughts like stones at still water. Regret, restlessness, the need to prove, to plan, to perform. But slowly, the surface stops rippling. What remains isn't peace so much as presence, the sensation of simply existing without justification. Time begins to change shape. Without noise to measure it, hours stretch and contract in strange ways. You start to understand how monks could sit for decades without losing their minds, because what they were sitting inside wasn't emptiness, it was everything. And then, without trying, you meet the one you've been avoiding, the quiet presence inside the quiet room, the part of you that has been waiting all along. Not the part that performs, not the part that produces, not the part that proves, the part that simply is. It doesn't speak in words. It doesn't need to. Its language is breath, stillness, awareness. The more you listen, the more you realize. This is the original voice. The one that existed before all the others moved in. Before parents told you who to be. Before culture told you what to want. Before fear told you what to avoid. This voice has been there your whole life, drowned out by noise you thought was necessary. It never left, never gave up, just waited, patient as stone, for you to stop running long enough to hear it. In that recognition, the hollow changes color. What once felt like a void begins to glow. What once felt like death begins to pulse with something that might be life. What you feared was ending was actually beginning. The hollow was never hollow at all. It was a chamber designed for echo, resonance, and truth. It was your temple, and you'd mistaken it for a tomb. You discover something else in that enforced pause. The hollow isn't empty. It's full of everything you've been too busy to be. Full of the artist you abandoned for practicality. Full of the dreamer you postponed for security. Full of the person who wants to lie in grass and watch clouds without checking the time. Every wisdom tradition knows this space. The fertile void, the dark night, the clearing before creation, the wilderness before revelation. Different names, same recognition. You can't fill a cup that's already full. Can't receive with hands that won't open. Can't transform while gripping who you are. But we've pathologized this openness, called it depression when it's gestation, called it crisis when it's chrysalis, called it breakdown when it's breakthrough waiting to happen. Perhaps you lost everything. 20 years building a life, gone. The structure that was your identity, dissolved. The relationship that was your foundation, ended. You find yourself with nothing but terrifying expanses of unscheduled time. Terror first. Raw, primal terror. Who are you without the thing that made you you? The silence feels like disappearing, like ceasing to exist without the constant validation of being needed. Friends have solutions. Fill the gap, they say. Stay busy. Keep moving. The terror in their voices reveals their own fear that without constant motion, they too might dissolve. Your stillness makes their busyness visible. Your emptiness threatens the fullness they've been using to hide. First impulse, immediately rebuild. New structure, new relationship, new anything to fill the devastating gap. But something deeper says stop. A voice you've never heard because you've never been quiet enough to hear it. Not the voice inherited from parents, not the voice adopted from culture. Your own voice, the one that existed before all the other voices moved in. So you do something radical, nothing. For months, absolutely nothing beyond basic survival. No goals, no productivity, no reconstruction. Just existence in the quiet everyone tells you to fill. In that spaciousness, without external validators, you discover who you are when not performing yourself. The part that chose paths not from calling, but from convention. The part that maintained relationships not from love, but from fear of alone. The part that built a life that looked right, but felt wrong. The part that was so busy being needed that you never asked what you needed. When you sit in stillness long enough, truly sit without escape routes, something fundamental shifts. Like sediment in disturbed water, swirling, chaotic, opaque, until stillness lets it sink. What remains is clarity. Not the clarity of knowing, but the clarity of seeing. Not answers, but the end of the wrong questions. Most people never experience this clearing. They keep the water constantly agitated. Every notification, a stick stirring the sediment. Every distraction keeping the chaos swirling. Living their entire lives in muddy water, never knowing clarity was just a pause away. The hollow contains your shadow. Everything you've rejected about yourself to remain acceptable. Emotions you've labeled dangerous. Desires you've deemed inappropriate. Truths you've declared inadmissible. All the parts that didn't fit the image you've been maintaining at the cost of your soul. When you sit in stillness, these rejected parts surface. This is why silence terrifies. It's full of everything you've spent your life avoiding. Every feeling you've numbed. Every truth you've denied. Every part of yourself you've traded for belonging. The first time they surface, you'll want to run. Back to the noise, the distraction, the comfortable numbness of constant input. The rejected parts don't arrive gently. They arrive with all the force of years of suppression behind them. But these rejected parts aren't enemies. They're power in exile. Your anger isn't dangerous. It's boundary-setting energy you've been too accommodating to use. Your sadness isn't weakness. It's depth you've been too busy to feel. Your fear isn't cowardice. It's wisdom trying to protect you from real danger you've been too distracted to notice. Your shadow wasn't your enemy. It was your unlived life waiting to be claimed, waiting to be welcomed home. In the silence, you start to feel things you haven't felt in years, maybe decades. Tenderness that has nowhere to go, longing that has no object, a strange, sourceless love that seems to want nothing but to exist. These aren't emotions you're having. They're emotions you are. They were always there, under the noise, waiting for you to get quiet enough to feel them. Something new begins to stir, not from outside, from inside, not from your trained mind, but from somewhere deeper, something that has never existed, because it could only come through your specific silence, your particular clearing, your unique hollow. This is what was waiting on the other side of the emptiness you feared. Not nothing, something. Something that couldn't exist until you made room for it. What emerges doesn't look like what you've created before. It couldn't. That person no longer exists. What emerges is rawer, stranger, more honest. The first real thing. The first that came from silence rather than noise. From space rather than accumulation. Maybe it wasn't a life transition. Maybe it was creative death. Everything you produced started sounding derivative. Every creation echoed someone else's voice. You were too full of everything already made to make anything original. You needed clearing, not inspiration or collaboration or new techniques. Clearing. So you stopped everything creative. No producing, no consuming, no analyzing. Complete severance from the thing that had defined you. The withdrawal was physical. Your hands ached to create. Your mind reached for familiar patterns like phantom limbs. Creation had been your identity. Without it, who were you? Months passed. Agony, then restlessness, then something shifting. The internal noise quieting, space appearing where fullness had been. Then, a sound. Not from outside, from inside. Not from your trained mind, but from somewhere deeper. Something that had never existed because it could only come through your specific silence, your particular clearing, your unique hollow. We live terrified of blankness. Created a world ensuring we never face quiet. Constant entertainment, endless consumption, perpetual connection. We've made it possible to live an entire life without ever being alone with yourself. To die without ever meeting who you really are. This avoidance has made us sick. Anxiety, the fear of spaciousness approaching. Depression, the weight of unfelt quiet. Addiction, the compulsion to fill nothingness with anything but itself. So many of the epidemics we face trace back to the same root. The disease of fullness in a species that needs space to thrive. In that sitting with emptiness, memories surface. Not of what was lost, but of yourself before the loss. Before identity became external. Before worth meant productivity. Before existence required constant proof. The person who had dreams unrelated to achievement. The person who could spend an afternoon doing nothing and call it living. These aren't nostalgic fantasies. They're archaeological discoveries. Evidence of a self that existed before you became someone's something. A self that's been waiting in the quiet for decades, patient as a seed in winter soil. When you open to nothingness, something unprecedented emerges. Something that didn't exist until you made room for it. Something that could only come through you, from your particular hollow, in this exact moment of pause. This is where originality lives. Not in accumulation, but in clearing. Not in fullness, but in space. Not in more, but in less. The world needs your silence more than your noise. Your stillness more than your motion. Your space more than your productivity. Because from quiet comes everything real. The silence has been calling your whole life. Through exhaustion that no amount of rest cures. Through anxiety that no amount of control calms. Through the haunting sense that something essential is missing. Because something is missing. Space. Room to be. Pause to breathe. Quiet to discover who you are when you stop trying to be someone. You've heard it in the moments between moments. In the pause before sleep takes you. In the gap between thoughts when your mind forgets to chatter. In the stillness that sometimes catches you off guard and feels, for just a second, like coming home. That's the hollow calling. That's the silence inviting you in. That's life waiting for you to stop running long enough to receive it. Not demanding, not urgent, just waiting. The way it's always been waiting. The way it will wait forever if it has to. Because silence is patient, and what lives inside it has nowhere else to be. Your authentic self doesn't live in noise. It lives in the pause between sounds, in the stillness between movements, in the space between thoughts. You've been looking for yourself in all the additions when you exist in the subtraction. And when you finally stop running, you'll discover what everyone who's ever stopped discovers. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full of you, the real you, the one who doesn't need noise to exist, the one who was waiting in the silence all along, the one who never needed to be anywhere but here, doing anything but this, being anyone but who you already are. The space wasn't threatening. It was holding all the parts of you that noise couldn't contain, all the truths that motion couldn't express, all the self that performance couldn't capture, all the life that busyness kept you too distracted to live. You just had to get quiet enough to find it, still enough to feel it, empty enough to be filled by it. The hollow was never empty. It was where life was waiting to begin again. What would happen if you stopped treating silence as the enemy and let it finally speak?